But after Jehoiada's death, the leaders of Judah came and bowed before King Joash and persuaded him to listen to their advice. They decided to abandon the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and they worshipped Asherah poles and idols instead. Because of this sin, divine anger fell on Judah and Jerusalem. Yet the Lord sent prophets to bring them back to him. The prophets warned them, but still the people would not listen. Okay, so just like that, after Jehoiada dies, we're back to turning away from God. Or the people of Judah were back to turning away from God. And Joash goes along with it. Probably because he was perhaps raised by some of these men. They really probably kind of even ran the show, so to speak, for a while as he grew up. He might have just been in a habit of listening to whatever they said and going along with it. But that doesn't give him an excuse. He should have known better. He was presented with a copy of the law from a young age. What's up, cool people? My name is Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so now we're looking at 2 Chronicles 24. Last chapter, the priests and Levites pretty much, you could argue they sort of staged a coup. They definitely took control of the temple and the throne and pretty much established a young king because the queen, who had been ruling for about 7 years, was not following God, was on a rampage, killing off anybody else from the royal family. So, yeah, they decided to put a stop to everything she was doing. Instated a new king, even though he was young. And, I mean, that was really kind of a way of them taking control. But just because they sort of, I'm going to air quote, had to have a king, especially in order to displace the previous ruler, they kind of decided, all right, this young boy is the son of the previous king. We're going to say he's king now. So, with that, things went from where people were not worshiping God for a while because at least 3 rulers prior to them taking control had not followed God themselves and even made altars, temples, and things like that to worship other gods. But now it's going back to where people are, dedicating themselves to God again. I mean, some of the individual people might have worshipped God the whole time, but now it's like kind of the official position of the kingdom again. Official stance, you might say. So, that's kind of the situation as we head into this chapter. So here we go, 2 Chronicles 24. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother was Zibiah from Beersheba. Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight throughout the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for Joash, and he had sons and daughters. At one point, Joash decided to repair and restore the temple of the Lord. He summoned the priests and Levites and gave them these instructions. Go to all the towns of Judah and collect the required annual offerings, so that we can repair the temple of your God. Do not delay. But the Levites did not act immediately. So the king called for Jehoiada the high priest and asked him, "Why haven't you demanded that the Levites go out and collect the temple taxes from the towns of Judah and from Jerusalem?" Moses, the servant of the Lord, levied this tax on the community of Israel in order to maintain the tabernacle of the covenant. Gonna pause there. I don't necessarily recall there being a mention of a tax, but, definitely tithes from, what the people had was a tax of a sort, so maybe it just wasn't worded that way. It says here, Joash reigned for 40 years, so definitely a long time as king, but it does specify that he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight throughout the lifetime of Jehoiada, implying that maybe he doesn't afterwards. But we'll get there when we get there. I'm not going to jump too far ahead. Then Joash wants to repair the temple that had been damaged probably from internal conflict, or definitely had been damaged from other kingdoms attacking. A few chapters ago it mentioned a group of Arabs and some other nearby kingdom who pretty much ransacked the temple, took a bunch of the valuable things from there, and probably the palace too. There certainly might have been some physical damage to the structure in the meantime, because I doubt, the armies of Judah were just going to sit by and quietly wait for that to happen. Whether it was to, repair the actual structure of the temple, or even just to, replace some of the sacred objects, or something of that sort. Either way, Joash wants to fix it. Asks the Levites and the priests to go gather a tax to have the money to pay for the repairs, but then they don't do it. They don't gather this tax, and he's then he goes to Jehoiada and is like, what's going on here? I asked you all to go collect this tax and start fixing the temple. Moses even did this to maintain the tabernacle back in his time. So this is clearly not the wrong thing to do if Moses did it way back when. There is a note there when it mentions instead of tabernacle of the covenant, it could be read as the tent of the testimony. I mean, it's still a similar idea, though. The tabernacle was a tent. Might have been a very big one, but it was a tent nonetheless. And I think it had even previously stated way back in Exodus and such that testimony and covenant were kind of interchangeable, especially when referring to the Ten Commandments and the physical representation of the covenant. Might have even used that wording when referring to what we call the Ark of the Covenant. Might have said Ark of the Testimony in some cases. Or at least it could be translated either way, potentially. In any case. So, after Joash kind of questions Jehoiada on this, we move on to verse 7. Over the years, the followers of wicked Athaliah had broken into the temple of God, and they had used all the dedicated things from the temple of the Lord to worship the images of Baal. So now the king ordered a chest to be made and set outside the gate leading to the temple of the Lord. Then a proclamation was sent throughout Judah and Jerusalem, telling the people to bring to the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, had required of the Israelites in the wilderness. This pleased all the leaders and the people, and they gladly brought their money and filled the chest with it. Whenever the chest became full, the Levites would carry it to the king's officials. Then the court secretary and an officer of the high priest would come and empty the chest and take it back to the temple again. This went on day after day, and a large amount of money was collected. The king and Jehoiada gave the money to the construction supervisors, who hired masons and carpenters to restore the temple of the Lord. They also hired metal workers, who made articles of iron and bronze for the Lord's temple. Now they're collecting this tax that Joash had mentioned. And it seems like the people were okay with it. So I guess the difference right now is, like, Joash kind of declared it more broadly to the rest of the people, rather than putting the burden solely on the priests and Levites to go and collect the tax. And I think the way it was worded in 2 Kings just made it sound all the more like the Levites were just too lazy to actually do what they were asked to do in this situation. And so because of their laziness and lack of follow through, they at least recognized that, but also, like, they sort of agreed to not put the labor and such on themselves, or even, like, the money handling, but they kind of passed that along to others. So in a sense, they were still being a little bit lazy about it, but at least they acknowledged that and, like, delegated what otherwise would have been their responsibility to other people so that it could actually get done. So they hired people for construction to fix what needed to be fixed in that way. They also hired metal workers to remake/replace some of the, articles, the tools, the things like that inside the temple. I don't really have too many other thoughts on that section, so I'll continue with verse 13. The men in charge of the renovation worked hard and made steady progress. They restored the temple of God according to its original design and strengthened it. When all the repairs were finished, they brought the remaining money to the king and Jehoiada. It was used to make various articles for the temple of the Lord. Articles for worship services and for burnt offerings, including ladles and other articles made of gold and silver. And the burnt offerings were sacrificed continually in the temple of the Lord during the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada lived to a very old age, finally dying at 130. He was buried among the kings in the city of David because he had done so much good in Israel for God and his temple. That was quite the honor, having a priest buried with the kings. There was even a former king who didn't get that honor because he was so bad in the people's eyes that he didn't deserve that. So, like, clearly only top tier people got this honor. And Jehoiada was the one to receive that. I mean, we have yet to see about the end of Joash's time as king and whether or not he gets buried there. But, yeah, he was definitely the main thrust of turning things back around and turning the people back to God. So, yeah. Temple is fixed, and it even says that it was strengthened. And strengthened it. I imagine that means they might have, like, physically reinforced some of the walls and things like that. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of Jehoiada's life. Not necessarily of Joash's, though. And given what it said earlier and how it specified that Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight while Jehoiada was alive, we will have to see how things go. On to verse 17. But after Jehoiada's death, the leaders of Judah came and bowed before King Joash and persuaded him to listen to their advice. They decided to abandon the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and they worshipped Asherah poles and idols instead. Because of this sin, divine anger fell on Judah and Jerusalem. Yet the Lord sent prophets to bring them back to him. The prophets warned them, but still the people would not listen. Then the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands and keep yourselves from prospering? You have abandoned the Lord, and now he has abandoned you." Then the leaders plotted to kill Zechariah, and King Joash ordered that they stone him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. That was how King Joash repaid Jehoiada for his loyalty, by killing his son. Zechariah's last words as he died were, "May the Lord see what they are doing and avenge my death." Okay, so just like that, after Jehoiada dies, we're back to turning away from God. Or the people of Judah were back to turning away from God. It kind of, from this kind of, view from the future, in hindsight, kind of perspective, it seems real obvious that, things went well when they worshipped the Lord. Things went poorly when they did not. So why did they not continue worshiping the Lord? It's, even kind of echoed in Zechariah's words here, or God's words through Zechariah, when he says, "Why do you disobey the Lord's commands and keep yourselves from prospering?" It's it should have been obvious to them that the times they prospered were the times that they worshipped the Lord. But no. People are dumb. Sometimes. So, instead of recognizing their own wrong, when Zechariah says this, the other leaders double down and are like, "Well, we don't like what this guy says, let's kill him." And Joash goes along with it. Probably because he was perhaps raised by some of these men. They even more likely had an influence on things, early in his time as king. They really probably kind of even ran the show, so to speak, for a while as he grew up. So he might have just been in a habit of listening to whatever they said and going along with it. But that doesn't give him an excuse. He should have known better. He was presented with a copy of the law, of the covenant, from a young age. Verse 23. In the spring of the year, the Aramean army marched against Joash. They invaded Judah and Jerusalem and killed all the leaders of the nation. Then they sent all the plunder back to their king in Damascus. Although the Arameans attacked with only a small army, the Lord helped them conquer the much larger army of Judah. The people of Judah had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so judgment was carried out against Judah. The Arameans withdrew, leaving Joash severely wounded, but his own officials plotted to kill him for murdering the son of Jehoiada the priest. They assassinated him as he lay in bed. Then he was buried in the city of David, but not in the royal cemetery. The assassins were Josachar, son of an Ammonite woman named Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of a Moabite woman named Shomer. The account of the sons of Joash, the prophecies about him, and the record of his restoration of the temple of God are written in the commentary on the Book of the Kings. His son Amaziah became the next king. See, now, also, this commentary on the Book of the Kings probably is not, like, the Book of the Kings that we would read in the Bible. That was probably the Book of the Kings itself. Or books, plural, as we kind of have it in a modern-day Bible. I don't know for sure if that's actually the same book, but this commentary definitely was not that. But speaking of 1st and 2nd Kings, back in that account, it definitely didn't make Joash seem like such a bad king, even after Jehoiada died. But here, it's like, nah, that after that, Joash wasn't good. And that's further emphasized by, other officials plotting to kill him because of murdering Jehoiada's son. So clearly, not all of the officials had agreed with that idea when it was carried out. Killing Zechariah, who was Jehoiada's son. Joash, he was already weak from being wounded in battle, it seems. Although it says they assassinated him as he lay in bed, possibly recovering, or attempting to recover from his wounds. So, but the overall view of Joash after Jehoiada's death is further emphasized by the fact that he was not buried in the royal cemetery. Jehoiada himself received that honor. Joash did not. Like I said, that tells you about the overall view of Joash as a king. Okay, we got a few notes to look at here, like in verse 25, where it's talking about, murdering Jehoiada's son. That comes from the Greek version in Latin Vulgate. Hebrew reads sons, plural, which is even worse then. But only the one son was specifically mentioned in this chapter. It's certainly not... It's certainly possible still that other sons of Jehoiada were murdered too. But we only know of the one for sure, based on previous verses. Note there, Josachar comes from, or as in the parallel text, it's 2 Kings 12:21. Hebrew here in this verse reads Zabad. That seems like a very different name to me. Well, maybe not very different, but because there's still the Z in there and anyway. This might be one of those situations where this guy could have actually sort of had both names depending on the timing, because different people throughout the Bible wound up being sort of renamed due to certain circumstances or events that they were involved with. Note down there about Jehozabad, not so much about Jehozabad as Shomer, his Moabite mother. But Shomer is paralleled in 2 Kings 12. Hebrew here reads Shimrith, which is considered a variant spelling. Okay, so different vowels and stuff there. But that one definitely seems a little more similar in a way than Josachar and Zabad. Because, you got the SH and the M and the R, and Joash is dead, and it's probably not going to be until the next chapter before we see what happens after although it does mention his son Amaziah becoming the next king. Given how things were at various times in Joash's life, Amaziah could sort of go either way in terms of loyalty to God. We'll just have to wait until next time to find out. So, yeah, it turns out Joash maybe wasn't such a great king as things would have seemed early on in his reign. Now, I don't think it's stated how far along in Joash's reign that Jehoiada wound up dying. So, I can't tell you for sure if it was the majority of those years that Joash was doing good things, or the majority was him doing bad things. Either way, it seemed like really he was just kind of got used to doing what he was told and just went with the flow, not really standing up for himself or, doing his own thing too much, except for maybe that part that it mentioned about wanting to repair the temple. But I digress. In any case, Jehoiada got the honorable burial. Joash did not. That should tell you a lot. Anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages, as well as my Discord server. That'll help you connect with other people who like the same kind of stuff and give us a way to chat outside of social media contexts, or at least most social media contexts. I don't know, is Discord considered a social media? Anyway, tangent. There's also a link to my supporter page down there if you want to help with what I'm doing and, pay for things to help keep it running and help keep things fresh and new. But, yeah. Whatever thoughts and questions you got, feel free to leave those down in the comments section below the video. Otherwise, that's all I got for you. So I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.